All right.
Right.
Welcome, everybody. This is actually the third presentation I've done with a colleague from the University of Oklahoma. Last year, I did this with Carl Grant. And each year we visit virtual reality and talk about what's actually happening in that world as respect to libraries. So I'd like to kick off, if I may, by going straight away into what virtual reality actually is. And I think this slide gives you a good flavor of it. To the left here, we have reality as we know it. And on the right, we have full immersion, virtual reality. In the middle, we have two different types of reality, augmented reality. And augmented reality is when you superimpose a digital object on the real world. Mixed reality is actually when you have objects in between you and the digital object in the real world. So you see here the duck's actually behind a table as opposed to superimposed on the table. The key lesson about all of this is that virtual reality isn't just one thing. It's a progression of stages. There is, however, one really big thing about this, and that is the fact that we're actually moving from how we interact with media to actually entering into a machine. All previous technologies did one of two things. They either projected electronic elements into our world, or they provided a window for us to actually look on that world. The key difference of virtual reality is that we're actually entering in to the machine. Two key values that really matter. One is immersion, because it allows us to feel things in a wholly different way. The second thing is interactivity. And I'd point out that this actually is really, really important. If you were watching me in reality, I'd be in 3D. And for those of us like me who've been days on Zoom, more even than I usually do, the restrictions of a 2D world really matter. So in a COVID world, actually, virtual reality is important. This table outlines when virtual reality is actually needed. And if you take a look, we've got the attributes to the left, we've got example uses in the middle, and example implementations on the right. I happen to know that many of these implementations have really done far better since COVID. If I take Labster, for example, which provides a virtual laboratory for you to experiment with chemicals, it already had the advantage of saving universities money because and being far safer, because experimenting with plutonium is hardly the thing you want to do in reality. But there's an additional value add if you have COVID around, because now you can actually do the same work remotely in a way that you couldn't do previously. The actual number of use cases, this in fact is a slide from my presentation last year, is prodigious. There's barely a discipline today in the US Academy that doesn't make use of virtual reality in one way or the other. And again, in many, many cases, these are really essential. In history, we may have been able to go visit and do virtual tours or do real tours of ruins around the world. Today, that's impossible. If I take a subject like journalism, one might say, hey, well, I don't really get how that applies. But teaching journalists how, when you get caught up in an event, when you see somebody running away from an explosion, doesn't necessarily mean that they set off the explosion. And again, you can actually enable a journalist to feel what a war zone is like, or what it's like being in a refugee camp. Another aspect that COVID's really driven forward is increased interest in virtual reality meetings. This particular graphic here is from Spatial. And if you take a look, they've actually got avatars that allow people to move around in space. Now, again, as somebody who's manned a virtual booth, I've been really jarred by the fact that people suddenly appear from nowhere. I can't see them coming to me. And from their perspective, They get this horrible feeling when they join, like, whoa, I've just been teleported in. This, using virtual reality, allows empathy, allows you to look at a group at a distance and go, oh, there's that person I hate, better not join that group. Or, oh, there's that person I love, I'm going to join that group, just as you do in the real world. This link here below shows you over 40 tools that are currently in development or actually being used. Another area, nursing. Prior to the pandemic, 65% of nursing programs used VR. I wonder how many are actually using it now. And for those trying to persuade students to attend campus, how nice to have, how important to have a virtual campus tour. In 2020, there's been already a couple of big announcements about virtual reality. The iPhone 12 has a LiDAR capability, and that's a laser scanner that actually allows you to judge distance. And so we can actually do augmented reality things. You see, here's a guy in reality, and when you hold up your iPad, you're able to see the arc with which he's able to use his arm. In this case, you're able to see what pictures look like on a wall in a room. Another big change has been the advent of the Oculus Quest. The Oculus Quest is a new headset, and amazingly, its sales growth under the pandemic has been 80%, and that's even with out of stocks. In short, the market for virtual reality continues to grow. In academic research, since last year, we've actually seen a slight decline in the number of papers produced that mention these words. But interestingly, one has to wonder whether or not that's because a lot of the experimentation phase is over, and what we're seeing now is actually implementations. One of those implementations I want to talk about is mental health. And mental health, because it's so dependent on experience and empathy, it's become really, really important virtual reality, in virtual reality. A number of studies like the two here indicate very high improvements in treatments by using virtual reality. And last year at the APA's TMS conference, this quote here was one of many, many examples showing how virtual reality is actually able to significantly improve outcomes in treating phobias like fear of driving, fear of heights, etc. The reason, of course, is that in virtual reality, you can actually mimic the real world, elicit those feelings of fear and anxiety, and control them at the time. We at Coherent Commons actually launched recently a product that documents all of these. It's open to registrants. It has over 200 virtual reality experiences. And if you go to mindscapecommons.net, you can actually see the full wealth of materials that we've found. What have we learned? Well, one interesting thing is that we need a new form of indexing. So we realized that actually there's many different types of immersion, and there's many, many different types of interactivity. And some of these elements actually depend on the headset or hardware you're using to activate. So we've made it so that you can actually understand in more depth how these platforms work. We've also discovered that although virtual reality delivers a superior experience, you can get a lot of the experience still in 2D. So in fact, we've made the database work perfectly well in 2 dimensions as well as in 3 dimensions. So to wind up here, libraries can really, really help in this space. All of these elements here to the left and right, really, really important for libraries to help. The virtual reality world has not made a big impact in libraries today. The impact's been at the departmental level, it's been in gaming, it's been in a number of other areas. And the challenge is that all of the elements that librarians bring to books and journals are missing. difficult to cite, difficult to index, training not available, individual departments trying to do training tools on how to use virtual reality. To explain these in more detail, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Bobby. Over to you, mate.
Unmute. Thank you, Stephen. Let me get my screen pulled up here really quickly. All right, well, I'm Bobby Reed, and I'm the head of emerging technologies at the University of Oklahoma Libraries. Today, I just want to talk to you briefly about virtual realities in libraries in this post-COVID world we all find, I say post-COVID as if we're there yet, world we all find ourselves in. So to do this, I'd like to take you through my experience running a VR program in an academic library in this insane year. We'll start by talking about the state of head-mounted devices post-pandemic and ask the question, can we continue sharing these devices? Next, I'll look at VR use in the academy and highlight a few trends I see emerging with VR use in scholarly activities. I will also detail some of the work OU Libraries has done in VR recently and what we hope to do in the future. I'll zoom out there for a little bit and I'll try to imagine where VR might go in the years to come in the academy. I want to say a special thank you for Stephen. He put this all together. So let's dive right in. Big question, was the COVID-19 pandemic the end of the library shared head-mounted device program? I wrote this sentence a while ago, and my particular phrasing of this question highlights that. I really thought that would be accurate by the time we got to this conference. In revising, I decided to leave it just so we could all remember for a bit, you know, how temporary we felt like this was even a couple months ago, at least here in the States. Even if we leave this pandemic behind us in coming months, we're still going to be left with a lot of lessons learned in hygiene and communal safety while outbreaks are occurring. This knowledge, it's going to forever change our behavior as library professionals and our patrons' behaviors as they move through spaces and utilize resources. You know, even if we get back to a perfectly normal, non-infectious world, I can't imagine the lessons of today will not still be present. So back to the question, right? Is the COVID-19 pandemic the end of the library shared HMD program? I don't think so, but it certainly is the catalyst towards far safer practices. So you might be asking, okay, Bobby, what are those practices though? At OU Libraries, we've been utilizing ultraviolet irradiation cleaning, quarantining headsets after people use them, and separating headsets out by the type of use in order to try to mitigate some of these dangers. Ultraviolet germicidal irradiation cleaning, so you'll hear me reference this and call it UVGI. It's a whole mouthful if I say ultraviolet germicidal irradiation. What I mean is we use radiation to kill life. We're using this after people use a headset with low power UV LEDs for the safety of our student workers. And we just expose the headsets. As you can see, this is a small cabinet we have for an Oculus Rift CV1, I think. We just expose it for larger amounts of time with safer light, because this light is very damaging, both in terms of how it ozones the air and the impact on your eyes. We have found that by placing UV safety goggles into the headset over the lenses, we can prevent damage to the lenses. Most VR headsets are going to be sensitive to UV light, particularly the lenses. And so you do want to make sure there's some form of protection if you use that covering the lenses. UV light also breaks down plastic. We think it's worth the risk at this point, or worth the degradation to ensure safety for our patrons. We haven't seen any breakdown, and we've been doing it since about March. The biggest difference between this practice and the practice in pre-COVID times is that we can't have multiple users back-to-back anymore with one device. And that's going to be the same issue we have with quarantining the devices, although that lag is incredibly more extreme. So quarantining is a much slower process than the UVGI sterilization. And it's very, I tried to find a lot of sources as I worked on this talk over the time, and they just kept shifting over time, if I'm being honest. I remember having Nature articles that said the virus would be unviable in 125 minutes suspended in pseudo fluid in total darkness. And that's not even remotely true now. So all I am trying to say is I think we have to exercise immense caution when we talk about the things we know with such an unknown state of the world. So for that reason, my suggestion in quarantining headsets is quite extreme, but it is in line with the more extreme findings of the Realm project. Head-mounted devices should be quarantined after use for 72 hours after they are completely dry. If you thought gross when I said completely dry, I think you had the right thought there. But those of us who have managed VR services know that these headsets get gross, especially with the rising popularity of non-scholarship apps like Beat Saber and intense games like The Climb, Echo VR, Robo Recall. These make users sweat excessively. Although this sweat sharing was always quite gross, the higher stakes of the pandemic caused us to make new policies. One of those is to separate our headsets out by use. Separating by use is an elitist option, if I'm being very honest. You have to have a large amount of equipment to be able to make a choice like this. Currently, we don't have any new headsets available for sweaty titles, but we are working towards bringing those services back to life. Our current prevailing thought is that we'll just use our last generation of headsets for our sweat sharing devices. That way, if they get gunked up, it doesn't have an impact on our scholarly activities, which is the real reason we have our VR program. And of course, anytime there are illness spikes in our area, this type of risky VR sharing is completely shut down. So it is shut down right now, for example, because in Oklahoma, we're still experiencing a pretty extreme spike and are at one of our highest points of hospitalizations. So that's how we try to keep it safe in a very unsafe time. But the real question is, what are our collaborators doing with this tech in their scholarship? So in the last year, I've seen a big uptick of head-mounted devices being a normal feature on the desks of scholars. I love saying this after that point that Stephen made about the decline of citations about VR. I mean, obviously it's speculation. I haven't done the lit review or anything for it, but I think this is really because it's just normal. I think it's a normal tool and people don't reference normal tools. They don't tell you what they use to get there. They start telling you their outputs. We know scholars are terrible about that. Their papers become black boxes of what actually happened. But VR for scholarly work can be broken into these three categories I have here of three broader intellectual pursuits if I arbitrarily break them into three larger intellectual pursuits. So go with me there on that one. So I'm going to break them into immersive data visualization, 360 design interfaces, and experiences that cultivate our empathy. These are three major areas of academic activity in VR in 2020. Part of it is the data sets that modern computational capacity allows scholars to deal with. They require some creativity to visualize in a way that our human brain can actually make sense of. You know, if I have 1,000 rows across 300 columns, there's just no possible way that I'm actually going to be able to visualize that through my imaginative capacity. However, a computer can probably present me with some kind of colorful visualization that might trigger some thoughts on my own data. VR is an integral tool here, and the community has leveraged VR hardware to create software packages that achieve these scholarly ends. We'll dive into most of the titles here on this slide, with the exception of Virtualytics, Unity, and Notes on Blindness. These are wonderful titles, but time, being linear, paced, and all, and I have a short amount of it. These are free applications, so I wanted to include them in this talk anyway, and give you search engine terms so you could download them and check them out yourself. So let's check out some of these visualization titles. The top one is the newest one, and I'm pretty excited about it. You'll probably see that. So Volume, Oval, and Chimera X are three of the more exciting examples of visualization tools being used right now at OU. Previously, I would have had Virtualytics in this top bullet point, which is a fantastic and powerful data visualization platform. However, I was recently fortunate enough to get an article from my dean about Volume, and it's pronounced Volume despite the missing O. And it's currently still free with just a couple of reduced functions. I believe one of the reduced functions is you don't get to choose your theme. So it's not really a big deal for scholars. We can navigate through that. So Volume will allow users to upload and manipulate CSV files in VR. Let's take a quick look at their video because I think these visualizations really speak for themselves. So every small dot you see there is a cell, is a data point. And we can change how those are displayed. So basically we would select which header we want to be displayed along which axis between the X, Y, and Z. We can even do things like display one header along two axes. So that way we can look at its relationship between only one variable rather than two variables. These yellow boxes we see allow us to also exaggerate or scale our data in any way, just our visualization. So that way we can see the true dynamism between a max and min more easily. And now let's see if I can get out of the video without failing. Oh, we did it. Okay, so Oval is what we want to talk about next, the Oklahoma Virtual Academic Laboratory. This is our in-house 3D viewer, and it is a VR classroom application designed to encourage remote collaboration between academics. Up to 100 users can inhabit the same VR space. They can import 3D content. They can analyze 3D models with all built-in tools. Oval, and I do have to be very clear, I'm super biased to Oval because Oval is OU Library's home-built multiplayer lab. We have a portal series that we run in Oval, and I want to show you an example of that quickly. So here's an example of that series. In this episode, we have a recreation of the Arc de Triomphe, which is that structure directly in the center of Palmyra, Syria. This city is an ancient site that has been mostly destroyed by extremist violence. Using crowdsourced photogrammetry in Oval, however, we were able to transport users back to Palmyra. In our portal series, we have an expert lecture in Oval about a 3D model. In this case, it's this Arc de Triomphe you can see, that all users can see and manipulate with Oval's tools. These tools include annotation, measuring, screenshotting, narrating, and video capturing tools. In addition to the ruins of Palmyra, we have also hosted portals events around the photogrammetric animation of sea turtles and French cave paintings. Here's one of my plugs. I have 2 plugs. Please reach out to me if you would like to join us for any future events. We like having as many multiplayer partners as possible, and we just upped it from 20 simultaneous users to 100. So we need more partners. And if you want to help us develop an episode, if you have some 3D content you want to visualize in an interesting way, also reach out to me about that. Always looking for more partners. Next on our list is Chimera X. Chimera X is the experimental version of Chimera. This is a free application from UC San Francisco and is updated very frequently. Chimera X is the next generation molecular visualization program. At OU, structural biology students and chemistry students alike narrate the functions of proteins and other structures while walking through them in VR. This program has been going for several years at OU in conjunction with Professor Rocky Rajan of the chemistry department. I'm just going to show you this in action. This video is wonderful because it really does. This is very similar to the way this plays out in our capstone courses. You'll have one student walking through their molecule. You might have another student in VR assisting them or giving another perspective, because in VR, your other perspective is just walking to the other side of the molecule. And then that will be displayed on a projector or a big screen TV in class. And these are 4-credit capstone courses. So, I mean, this is one of the biggest assignments a structural biologist or a chemistry student might do in their career at OU. And it happens inside of VR. And part of that is to represent that this tool is used also by professionals. They continue to go on into their career and just keep doing the same thing for the most part as they did in the academy. And the best part about these 3 programs is that they're all free in some way right now. The Volume is a freemium model, but the other 2 are wholly free. They're constantly evolving and they're focused on researchers and research activity. All right, that's enough about visualization. Let's talk about design interfaces. Adobe Medium, I know it says Oculus there, but it's recently become Adobe Medium, is a virtual reality sculpting tool that leverages your latent finger painting and mud sculpting tools from childhood into powerful making abilities. In the picture at the top, you can see me sculpting ligaments onto the 3D model of an elbow joint. I made that joint by downloading and importing each individual bone and then literally just like sticking them together like they look at a picture. It wasn't, I'm not some sort of smart guy. I just used the tools available. And even those reference images, I was able to download with a browser inside the headset. So I could even do my research without leaving the headset of the reference materials I need to make the 3D objects. From there, I can export those 2 separate files as 3D models and 3D print them with different materials. So I can create a hard and soft model to show bone structures with soft tissue on top of it. What's so impressive about this from the VR standpoint is Medium is really just like a sculpting tool. You hold down one index finger and flail your hand and infinite clay goes out into space. I do have to mention the community darling Blender. I could probably talk about it this whole time, but instead I'm just going to urge everyone to download it if you haven't already. There are plenty of free YouTube tutorials to teach you anything you need to know about this platform. Just remember the name Blender Guru. In the last year, since the release of their new GUI in Blender 2.8, users have been abandoning CAD, animation, rendering software, all kinds of different softwares left and right because Blender's here. Blender's free, and Blender utilizes OpenXR now in a very neat way. So Blender can actually launch into VR natively from its development scenes. This is something you even will have to kind of do some wrangling with Unity to get going right away. And now Blender can launch into it natively. This isn't even like a beta package. This is part of their stable release. If this wasn't an indication that VR is going to become at least looking at your design interface for 3D artists, I just think that's exactly what this is. This is telling us that this will be the industry standard tool outside of maybe Cinema 4D. Now to talk about the weird one, A-Frame. Okay, so A-Frame is this native HTML5 feature. So imagine literally writing plain geometry into HTML tags, and that's basically A-Frame. If you think about the Cartesian coordinate geometry you learned in school, you know, X, Y, Z coordinates, this is basically how it works. A-Frame coding just asks for positions of the object and something to define the object. So it's very hard to explain, so I'm just going to show you an example. So this is all vanilla HTML that you're looking at right now. Each one of those objects has a location in space that's like X, Y, Z, and then it has additional information to define the boundaries of each object. Now you might see these small light things coming by and you'll see that the surface of the other objects is reacting. Now this is the neat part about A-Frame. It's not just throwing things out there. It's a physics system, a very light physics system that's built in and accessible to anybody with a notepad. You can see as these lights move, the objects react. That's not coded. The light is coded, the movement of the light is coded, but the response of the objects is baked in. That's kind of a very new thing for developers. And it's really wonderful and very amazing to imagine this can happen with HTML. Just imagine the accessibility librarians. HTML, you only need a notepad and people can create things like this. I want to dive in just a little bit back into Medium to talk about what a cool example that is of an emerging technology. If we take a look at some of the early creation tools that have come to VR, you know, like Google Blocks, Google Tilt Brush, and Oculus Medium, of course, it's resembled a race to build what kids do without guidance, this boundaryless play in creation. Let me give you a real world example of the simplicity. My wonderful mother, who has never been good at operating controls, I tried to get her to play like every cooperative video game growing up. She loves sculpting in Medium. So here's a video of my mom 5 minutes after putting on a VR headset for the very first time in her life. I can't tell you how huge this is as somebody who has to teach people how to use software and hardware all the time. I just showed her the index finger and then told her to just start pushing buttons. Look at your hands when you get confused. And she was able to start immediately. In about an hour, she had designed our family farm. It's very impressive how far these tools are simplifying these modes of production. Now, design interfaces, visualization, these are very important, but I believe the most important work, maybe VR's magnum opus of this generation, is certainly going to be the work it can do in empathy. My soapbox, I'm so sorry. The last 4 embarrassing years of hate in the United States is something I feel incredibly obligated to have an active role in changing. I genuinely hope every American hearing me right now feels similarly. VR has a particularly powerful role to play here. This isn't just a random soapbox. Award-winning empathy experiences like Traveling While Black and Notes on Blindness have enabled global users to better understand the struggles of fellow humans that they previously, could only imagine without an immersive aid like VR. I found the empathy work incredibly powerful on older headsets with lower resolution, but with the Rift S moving forward, I found that the resolution in the headset has caused a profound change in my memory. My brain will now actually begin to organize memories of a real space right in tandem with memories of its virtual representation. I'm gonna have to show you an example, otherwise this is just gonna sound too heady. When I spend too much time in a VR representation of a real space, my memories do not distinguish between the times where I was in there in actuality and the times I was in there virtually. So the first time I noticed this, I was working on annotations for what I have on my screen here. This is a virtual exhibit of our real physical exhibit in one of our main library branches, From Tragedy to Triumph. And it's an exhibit about the 1921 race massacre that took place in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So you can move around in this visualization that we have on our website, very much like you would move around this space in reality. Now, what I found after I worked in this space for a long time virtually and then walked back through it in reality, was that I started trying to look for my virtual reality tools in real life. I got to the very center of the space and realized that I needed to add another annotation, only to realize if I shake my body and move my hands, no heads-up display ever shows up in real life. Although I imagine any of our patrons walking by probably thought I was a pretty crazy librarian sitting there shaking. Virtual walkthroughs like this, just as a side note, can be created with any newer model iPhone. So I believe that's the 11 and greater. This is the LiDAR that Stephen was talking about, plays heavily in it, in about 30 minutes of your time using Matterport software. I do want to give you a very large caution. Because of Matterport's terms of service, they claim ownership of a lot of the data you push through it. So please make sure you read those terms of service before you just dive in and utilize it. It is an amazingly powerful tool, but there's not been a lawsuit on their terms of service. So I don't know how actionable they are. So make sure that you're not, giving away other people's art. And as this uncanny valley, as it becomes just a little crack that we step over with all these higher fidelity headsets, the cultivated empathy that we get from these experiences, it's going to converge just like those annotations onto our actual experience. And this is going to happen more and more. With older resolution headsets, this didn't happen. It was really with the Rift S moving forward. I do want to give a big shout out to the great work my partner in crime here is doing today. Stephen's company, Coherent, has really done some amazing work with Mindscape Commons. Mindscape Commons is the world's first resource for immersive and interactive content in mental health. Everyone should go try the basic access plan and give it a shot for yourself because, and Stephen, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I checked the website. I believe it's still free, right? The basic access? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and they have, so the really beautiful work, and the thing that got me so excited when Stephen first told me about Mindscape Commons was that they have wrangled the wild web of 360 videos in VR in a lot of cases to provide you some curated content. And I mean, that's huge. I mean, it's a ton of work. I mean, it's basically the job, I've been doing for years. Wait, Stephen, are you trying to replace me with a platform? All right, it's not cool. But jokes aside, do yourself a favor and do your institution a favor and check out Mindscape Commons. The only thing you can do is give it a shot and see if it's right for your patrons. To now zoom in from the Academy and talk more about VR, about VR at OU specifically. So VR at OU Libraries has tried to make a project cycle that allows fellows, undergrads, grads, and faculty to experience the knowledge movement from research to education and back again. And if I'm being really honest, probably to figure out how to leverage your life in terms of getting paid to do those things in different various ways. We work with faculty members to develop VR experiences, and we provide VR expertise to their research. We work with students to give them near native literacy through these projects. We try to make sure, even if it is kind of pulling teeth for us to have an undergraduate on one of these projects, that we do have it because we have seen such huge outcomes with our students becoming professionals of tomorrow. And they give our students an edge when it comes to the hiring pool. Our former teammates find themselves at Boeing, Harvard, and the Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation, just to name a few. The main philosophy we have at play here, particularly with our development, is to try to always do work that can be built upon and that builds upon the work we've done previously. So like one example of this would be like our accessibility functions that we have built into Oval. So we have features like scaling and ambidextrous controls. These features are now baseline of any VR experience we ever make. It isn't robust by any means, I know that, but being able to help folks living with visual and motor impairment or have an equal experience in VR, I mean, that's a huge win for us. We're a tiny library team. I'm pretty proud of that. But we are certainly going to seek to bake in additional features like this as we figure them out in the future. The infrastructure piece that also makes this possible is the entry-level undergraduate job in our makerspaces. These students are essential and become VR professionals of tomorrow. They also bring in a lot of new ideas and technologies, and they ensure that our full-time staff stay flexible and up to date. It really blew me away that I didn't even make it through my 30s without feeling like an old man in emerging technologies. It happens quick. I see the future in VR in academic libraries as an exploration very, very worth exhausting. There are many fights ahead for the stewards of head-mounted devices. Just to name one, Facebook is trying to require all Oculus users to authenticate through a Facebook account. Bad actors like this are going to continue to try to lock down and create platformization and reduce the ability to have standardization and interoperability. Community professionals like tech librarians like myself have to stand up for an open future. We have a lot of purchasing power. And that's how we stand up for that future. We don't purchase things that are bad. And you might be thinking, Bobby, you've mentioned a lot of Oculus products. I still don't know what I'm going to do in this future, but I'd love to talk to many of you about what you think we can do to mitigate the danger of requiring all of our users to authenticate with a personal Facebook account. And I'd like to do that so we can have an open future before we all get priced or tabooed out of our ability to express the spectrum of information we stand as shepherds to. I also see the bright future of recapturing the modes of production through VR. Development is becoming simpler and simpler. 5 years ago, 3D modeling was still quite difficult, and you better have brought your climbing gear for the learning cliff. Today, my 65-year-old mom can sculpt her farm in about an hour with VR with no experience. I can't imagine the increase of this development optimization. One day, you'll be building whole apps from your headset and dictating C#. That actually sounds really horrible, but that's why we have undergrads. They keep us thinking that these new ideas are not horrible, and they keep the lifeblood of the emerging tech team new. Thank you for your time. Sorry if I was a little long-winded. Do we have any questions?
Bobby, we've got one here. I'm not sure if the host is going to come in. Not necessarily a question, but an observation from my consortium. But even the more well-funded libraries don't have the luxury of a fully decked VR lab. A couple of our librarians have been leveraging free platforms like Mozilla Hubs to great effect. That's from Eric Chow.
How are you accessing Mozilla Hubs? Or what type of interface are you looking at? I'm very curious there.
Let's see. Yeah, I don't know if you're on the chat, Bobby.
Is that on the
That's on the chat. Eric says he can chat. I'm not sure here how to switch him on or if I can.
I don't think I'm seeing the chat.
He's saying the librarians are building through browser level stuff.
Yeah, we are. We're a weird example. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that. We do almost all of our development right on our librarian team. The way we've been able to enable this is probably about 2 years ago, we worked diligently to try to get basically an IT coded position put into the team to be a solid developer. And we had to really kind of show the utility and the return on investment in that through grant support. But I can tell you that now the university is really allowing us to look at expanding that because of the utility they've found in the position. I do think it's a lot about the person though. I mean, you need someone that wants to build up a library development practice. And I think that's very rare because it is a nightmare amount of work.
I think the point I'd make to Eric is that we're seeing all kinds of deployments, and some people are literally using cardboard and the phones. Some people, a lot of librarians have kids, and at $300, an Oculus Quest is becoming increasingly affordable. And there's a lot of this material in departments. We did a survey last year, and pretty much every college had multiple deployments at the departmental level making, by the way, all the mistakes of non-librarianship, bad licenses, bad training, no ability to access, no promotion. Even students in the department didn't know they had some of these tools available, because departments aren't set up to deploy technology shared across a campus. They're simply not.
I see a couple of Zoom questions coming in. We have one: my library found that Oculus headsets are designed for single user accounts, and that using an enterprise headset would require us to have special software or do our own development work. How did you get around the user accounts? At first, we just kind of passed around passwords and logged in and out, which is not a good piece of advice. What I would really tell you is almost everything I've suggested today can be launched outside of the Oculus platform. And that's kind of what we do. We use things that don't need the Oculus platform to launch. And the other side of that is, yeah, we do a lot of our own development work. And I know that's not really an option, but the great thing is everything we ever develop is open and available for you, unless for some reason we have a grant that requires us to have a non-disclosure on it.
No.
What do you, Stephen, you heard anything else about enterprise accounts, particularly on?
Yeah, so we actually, we figured out a way for our experiences to actually give the passwords access within the experience itself.
That's neat. I'm gonna steal that from you.
So it's a little bit clunky, but it gives you the experience, with a high quality headset. And look, we're in an early phase here, so we'd welcome interactions and feedback. We're really eager to partner up with folk and figure out, especially if you have mental health experiences within your department, within your university. We'd just love to hear from you, and at the very least, we can actually reference experiences that you have that are quality. We think it's very important not to do any old experience. Experiences that are quality, we'd love to put them into the directory. Question here from Tamara: how were Mindscape Commons experiences created? Did Coherent create them all? Amazingly, about half the experiences on Mindscape Commons are open, and we link to them from the outside. About half we created ourselves. And little story here, we were able to do it 2 days before lockdown, thanks to Mercer University. So a big shout out to Mercer University and the students who actually acted out these sessions. At the time, I think we're all a lot more comfortable. Horrible though the pandemic is, we're a lot more comfortable with it. At the time, we were like, whoa, we're taking major life risks here to get this important work done. And as a result, we had 50 experiences that we actually recorded in a 3D video or 360-degree video.
One more comment, I think, for Eric that might be a bit helpful on the looking for the gateway drug to get users on board. It sounds really weird, but I mean, jealousy is the number one at OU. I mean, we basically you just try to make sure you can get one faculty member to do something in public that makes other faculty members incredibly jealous. And then you end up in a terrible situation where you have a queue and you have to, somebody calls you and you're like, yeah, I can work with you in like a year. It's not a bad problem, but it's also not great. But that's been the main thing, is really just trying to make sure that whatever we do emphasizes our faculty members, not us. And so that ends up making it to where people want to work with our team, because working with our team does stuff like, just get you faculty points or whatever, or tenure points, whatever is important to you in your life.
Great. Let's see. Got to say, Bobby, really appreciated your shout out on the empathy side for where we are politically at the moment. I think that was
I was nervous about that, so I appreciate that.
Massively a good point. I think if we can, as humans, use this technology to feel better, and I mean that in every sense. So not just health-wise feel better, but feel better about our lives and each other. That's huge. let's see on the thing here.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So someone asked, can you say more about the usage change as of COVID? Well, first, no one wanted to use VR, so it was very easy. Everyone was like, no, but then we had several faculty members who rely on our devices, not on their own, start kind of asking, well, since no one's using it, can I check this out? So it really began as we had so little usage that we could kind of take our devices and just start letting faculty members have an exceptional checkout of them. So that's how we started. Really, we ended up building, this is so weird. We ended up building a lot of things. We ended up building a UV cleaning box for our course reserved textbooks. So that's how we got into UVGI cleaning. That's how I ended up reading this stupid UVGI book that took parts of my life away. And we really were just like, well, why not apply this to VR? And so I sent something off to Oculus and they were like, you'll destroy the lenses. And so then we had to come up with something to cover up the lenses. But really, the main thing we try to do is be really transparent with our patrons. So like if I'm handing you a headset, I'm going to tell you when the last time it was used and how it was used, if it was something that could cause sweat or coughing. And we've had some problems. We developed an international student experience that kind of told the story through some 360 video and just a tiny bit of VR development of what it looked like for an international student to try to get out of Norman, Oklahoma, get back to Serbia, and then get back into a pandemic hot zone of the United States. There's a lot that I think was really good for our faculty members to see there. However, despite telling them, okay, for a showing of this, you need to have one person wear the headset. Do not let other people wear it. They ended up running, 50 or 60 people through one headset. And things like that will happen. And it's terrifying. You just have to make sure you tell people how to do it best and hope your patrons listen.
Great. I think that's it for the questions, and we're at time.
All right. Well, feel free to email us if you guys want to work on anything or talk about anything. Stephen and I love brainstorming new ideas.
Absolutely. And if you're attending the show, well, I guess everybody is attending the show. We will be staffing the booth, the Coherent Digital booth. I'll be here. I don't think Bobby will be there. I can text him. Stop by and come say hi. Really, it's early phases for Mindscape Commons. It was only launched a few weeks ago, and we'd love to engage with you and figure out what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong and needs to be fixed. Very much appreciate everybody tuning in here. Bobby, thank you. That was brilliant. And posting the stuff, my file, Bobby, maybe you can do the same, post it in the lead here.
Okay, yeah, I'll post it in just a second. I'll download it. Yep.
Great. Thanks all.
Okay, thanks you guys for coming. Appreciate you.